Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. Today's date is December 10, 2021. In this video, we're going to cover a couple of subjects, starting with the U.S. diplomatic boycott of the upcoming Olympics to be held in China, and then pivoting over to a really horrific story out of the U.S. involving the forced labor of some victims of human trafficking forced to work in onion fields. Really crazy stuff. So let's start with the announcement from White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki that U.S. diplomats would be boycotting the Olympics.
The Biden administration will not send any diplomatic or official representation to the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics and Paralympic Games, given the PRC's ongoing genocide and crimes against humanity in Xinjiang and other human rights abuses. The athletes on Team USA have our full support. We will be behind them 100% as we cheer them on from home. We will not be contributing to the fanfare of the games.
Okay, so to recap and fill in some of the gaps here, to be clear, this is just a diplomatic boycott. The U.S. athletes are going to be going to the Olympics. The U.S. just isn't sending some of the diplomats who normally would be accompanying them. And since this news, some other countries such as Australia and the UK, and I think also Canada, have joined the diplomatic boycott. However, in the words of one Chinese official, nobody cares. And I think that that's a pretty fair statement because, personally, I didn't even know that they sent diplomats, so whatever. But she did say genocide specifically, not just crimes against humanity, genocide. However, the U.S. accused China of genocide back in January under the Trump administration, and then obviously the Biden administration has continued this claim, as you just saw in the clip. However, some U.S. attorneys who are apparently instrumental in actually launching any kind of proceedings or anything like that disagree. They feel that there is evidence possibly for crimes against humanity, like maybe they could make that case, but that the evidence falls short of genocide specifically, although that clearly isn't stopping the politicians from running with it. Another wrinkle in this entire story is that China has been promoting a lot of tourism in the Xinjiang region. And even with that amount of foreigners traveling through the region, evidence still seems hard to come by of exactly what's going on there, with many people pointing to articles like this one from the Associated Press titled "Terror and Tourism: Xinjiang Eases Its Grip, but Fear Remains," as possibly an indicator that this is another weapons of mass destruction trumped-up claim by the U.S., which the U.S. is now famous for doing. In response, we see a tweet here from the Friends of Socialist China account stating, "The U.S. continues to throw around baseless accusations about forced labor in Xinjiang, but perhaps it would be better off investigating a bit closer to home." Then we have a meme featuring Wang Wenbin from 2nd December 2021, and there's a quote, "Forced labor is a serious problem in the U.S., not in Xinjiang. If you are interested in forced labor, I would like to share some facts. In the U.S., there are approximately 500,000 child farm workers. Roughly 240,000 to 325,000 women and children in the U.S. are victims of sexual slavery. Up to 100,000 people were trafficked into the U.S. for forced labor annually over the past 5 years, and half of them are sold to sweatshops or enslaved in households. Those who spread lies about forced labor in Xinjiang should conduct investigations in the U.S., where I'm sure that they will find more facts about forced labor." So let's pivot now to one of those stories. This is kind of a big story that has been breaking this week from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. This is in the southern U.S. southeast state of Georgia. The article is titled, "This has been happening for a long time. Modern-day slavery uncovered in South Georgia." The article is by Lautaro Greenspan, and again written for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, December 3rd, 2021. Crackdown on human trafficking operation signals shift in immigration enforcement. The article begins, "A years-long human trafficking operation trapped migrant workers in, quote, modern-day slavery on South Georgia farms, according to a federal indictment unsealed last week. Victims include over 100 laborers smuggled from Mexico and Central America into, quote, brutal and, quote, inhumane working conditions. Under the threat of gun violence, some were allegedly forced to dig for onions with their bare hands, earning only 20 cents for each bucket harvested. At least 2 people died on the job. Another was allegedly repeatedly raped. When not out in the fields, workers were detained in work camps, surrounded by electric fencing, or held in cramped living quarters, including dirty trailers with raw sewage leaks. There was little to no access to food or safe drinking water. 24 accused members and associates of the criminal enterprise that perpetuated the exploitation now face a slew of felony charges, according to a press release from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Georgia. The multi-agency cooperation that yielded the indictment, dubbed Operation Blooming Onion, comment that is a little too tongue-in-cheek for me anyway, may be one of the largest ever human trafficking and visa fraud investigations in the country, Vice News reported. Only 2 of the defendants are described as South Georgia business owners in the indictment. Most were labor contractors or recruiters. Their alleged criminal mistreatment of workers took many forms. According to the indictment, laborers were charged unlawful fees for transportation, food, and housing. And though they were putatively hired for agricultural work, some migrants were illegally used for lawn care, construction, and repair tasks. To prevent escapes, members of the accused crime ring unlawfully confiscated workers' passports and documents. Conspirators also sold and traded workers amongst themselves, per the indictment. Quote, "The American dream is a powerful attraction for destitute and desperate people across the globe, and where there is need, there is greed from those who will attempt to exploit these willing workers for their own obscene profits." David Estes, acting U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Georgia, said in a statement, quote, "Thanks to outstanding work from our law enforcement partners, Operation Blooming Onion frees more than 100 individuals from the shackles of modern-day slavery and will hold accountable those who put them in chains," unquote. The crimes chronicled in the indictment were alleged to have occurred in the South Georgia counties of Atkinson, Bacon, Coffee, Tatnall, Toombs, and Ware, where local farmers paid the defendants to provide contract laborers. The crime ring that orchestrated the human trafficking operation reaped over $200 million from the illegal scheme. Conspirators are facing charges including mail fraud and mail fraud conspiracy, forced labor and forced labor conspiracy, money laundering conspiracy, and witness tampering. Solimar Mercado Spencer is a senior staff attorney at the Farm Worker Rights Division of the Georgia Legal Services Program, a nonprofit law firm that represents low-income farm workers in Georgia with issues related to their wages or working conditions. Among the division's current set of clients are victims of the criminal enterprise uncovered by Operation Blooming Onion. Mercado Spencer said the revelations inside the federal indictment were no surprise. Quote, "This has been happening for a long time in Georgia, and these people that were arrested are not the only ones doing these things," she said. Quote, "I hope that law enforcement keeps busting these operations because that's not the only one going on in Georgia. Because it's happening in rural areas, nobody sees the victims," Mercado Spencer said. Quote, "All you see is, your onions at Kroger, a supermarket. You can go buy them. You don't know where they came from, but this is happening, and nobody notices it. And these are essential workers that have been keeping us fed through the pandemic." Per the indictment, the exploited foreign workers were admitted to the U.S. through fraudulent use of the H-2A guest worker visa program, which has been booming in Georgia as farmers struggle to find domestic sources of labor. According to the Federal Office of Foreign Labor Certification, Georgia had 27,614 H-2A positions certified in fiscal year 2020, up from roughly 5,000 in fiscal year 2010. Comment, so that's more than a 5-fold increase. And what's this whole labor shortage anyway? They're not paying people. They don't want to pay people. Capitalism's having a big crisis right now, and, a lot of things are up in the air. This is one of the outcomes of that. Continuing, under the H-2A program, workers' legal status in the U.S. is contingent on remaining under the employment of the party that sponsored their visa. Mercado Spencer says that the structure can put workers at disadvantage, with limited worker protections included in the program being overlooked. Quote, "It's not like they can just leave and go work for another employer because the visa is tied to that one employer. So that's the problem with the H-2A visa program, is that it gives too much control to the employer over the worker. And once the workers are here, they're kind of stuck." Sometimes, Mercado Spencer added, employers, quote, "want to cut corners and make as much profit." Yeah, usually. They want to cut corners and make as much profit as possible. That's the idea. And that's how they do it, by exploiting these workers, unquote. And commenting, of course, we view all of capitalism fundamentally, the extraction of surplus labor that is more value than the workers are being paid. This is always exploitation, of course, within this liberal capitalist framework. It's just these egregious cases that they will call exploitation. Continuing. A shift in immigration enforcement. Among the federal agencies involved in uncovering the South Georgia trafficking ring was Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, which is part of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. In a statement released Monday, ICE said that Operation Blooming Onion is the first investigation brought to a close under the agency's new, quote, labor exploitation model. In October, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas announced a shift in priorities for immigration enforcement. Instead of targeting unauthorized workers through mass raids on workplaces, as was the norm in past administrations, authorities are now taking aim at exploitative employers and businesses that violate labor laws. Quote, we will not tolerate unscrupulous employers who exploit unauthorized workers, conduct illegal activities, or impose unsafe working conditions, Mayorkas said in a memo. Mercado Spencer said that she welcomes the change in policy established by Mayorkas' directives with reservations. Quote, it's not something permanent. It's not established law. With a different president, things could shift again in the opposite direction. What immigrants need is legislation to protect them, unquote. And there's a note that Lautara Greenspan is a Report for America Corps member covering Metro Atlanta's immigrant communities. So, commenting now, let me just state that I share those reservations. I mean, it could change under Biden, obviously, and I don't know exactly where this is coming from or, what the time frame is on this new policy change. I'll believe it when I see it, basically, because the U.S. is just known for astounding people with all kinds of atrocities and injustices. For example, who would have ever thought that civil asset forfeitures, which is basically when police stop people at a traffic stop and then say, oh, hey, you have money on you. I think that it's connected with a crime, and they can just seize it, that the amount of seized property by police under civil asset forfeitures would actually, a few years ago, surpass the amount of, private burglaries and robberies. So that's where we're at. I'll believe it when I see it. This is ICE. This is Department of Homeland Security we're talking about. Yeah, we have no real reason to trust them, nor should we ever. So here's one example that broke about a week ago of, a really egregious labor law violation. Not just labor law, but all kinds of other laws as well. And U.S. history is riddled with this. As far as the whole thing earlier about Chinese crimes against humanity or whatever, people have commented that the U.S. is astoundingly hypocritical pointing these things out. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're inaccurate, because somebody who's a hypocrite can still point out accurately things that other people are doing wrong. It just means that they're not applying the same standards to themselves. That said, U.S. government credibility, particularly when it comes to accusing other countries of various crimes, countries that they have a vested interest in trying to stop diplomatically, economically, that they're trying to gain an advantage over. I mean, they're pretty craven and ruthless with regard to that. So I'm going to leave it here for now. What do you think? Do you have resources relating to these discussions, relating to the accusations of genocide and human rights abuses in China or in the U.S.? Leave them in the comments. We'll continue the discussion there, as always. Thanks for listening. Thanks to the current patrons whose names are on the screen. If you'd like to get your name on the screen, head to patreon.com/socialismforall. If you'd like to help out without making a donation, click and like, subscribe, leaving a comment, even if it's just good video. All of that helps to boost the channel. And thanks for whatever you do in support of socialism, whether it has anything to do with this channel or not. Join an organization if there's a good one in your area, or make a contribution if you're not ready to join yet, or start a project of your own if you have an idea in mind and friends and resources to help you out. Thanks again, and we'll catch you in the next video.